Hello everyone, it's your favorite Western Down in Space here, and a lot of people have been talking about the new Doctor Who series. However, I mostly just hear, most of the discussions I hear about boil down to, oh, this show is terrible because it's gay. No, this show is great because it's gay. Like, no one talks about the actual plot or characters. It's very strange. Like, no one is talking about that as far as I can tell. It's just about that one aspect. And quite frankly, it was getting under my nerves for a while, so I decided I was going to be the one to do it. I was going to give an actual review of the first 2 episodes of the show. I think that's fair, first 2 episodes. I mean, after all, the 10th Doctor is lodged in my head after just a few bits of memories I have from when I was a little kid, so I think it's a fair comparison. Either way, we will go over the first 2 episodes, mostly, of course, over our 2 main characters and the actual plot themselves, what I think about it overall of the new Doctor Who series. Is it good? Is it bad? Let us see. Now, of course, I think it's only appropriate to start with the characters, since pretty much the Doctor and his companions are some of the biggest deals whenever you review a Doctor Who show. And to start with the Doctor himself, he's just kind of bland. And I don't mean that necessarily as an insult, I just mean it as he's bland. He has moments of interesting characterization where he almost does something that indicates a proper personality, but then you get other moments where it's like it just doesn't come together correctly. It's almost like they don't know what they want his personality to be. And there have been Doctors, of course, that can show a wide range of emotions. The 10th Doctor being easily one of the most obvious, or he could show all kinds of emotions. But the 10th Doctor was kind of built as the most human of the Doctors. So, of course, he had the most human range of emotions. The ninth one was a closed-off, cynical person because he had to deal with so much from the Time War. The 11th Doctor was filled with childlike wonder. The 12th Doctor was a grumpy old man. What's this one's gimmick? I just don't see it. Now, granted, once again, it's only the first 2 episodes, but I do feel between the pilot and the first main episode, you should be able to get a grasp of what this guy's personality is, but I just can't. I just can't, really. And to address the whole people talking about how gay the show is, it really is in the first 2 episodes. Like, there's like 1 or 2 scenes that that even talk about it or mention it or bring it up in any way. It's really not a focus in these first 2 episodes. Maybe it becomes a thing down the line, really, but it just really isn't here. And doesn't really factor into his character much, except for him kind of being eccentric. But like half of all the Doctors were incredibly eccentric individuals. It's one of the most consistent traits of the Doctor, so that isn't exactly unique. So, but another thing is kind of sad. It was one of the almost most consistent aspects of this Doctor is that he's kind of pathetic. Like, it's really sad because you can tell I think what they're trying to go for with some of the scenes I'm going to bring up is they're trying to come off like he's this smart thinker. He plans out things, thinks outside the box. But the problem is, it just makes him kind of look lame. Like, for example, in the first episode, he has these gloves that basically allow him to grab things easily, deal with gravity manipulation. It's a whole thing that's hard to explain. Basically, it makes climbing really easy. Now, that's actually kind of interesting. It makes him a bit of a gadgeteer or that kind of thing. The problem is the moment he loses those gloves, he can't even climb up ladders, which does nothing but to make it feel that he's a very underwhelming, not very good Doctor relying on a gimmick to even try to do something that the other Doctors wouldn't have even thought about having to deal with. Or in the first episode when he has to he's trying to find a way out of this mess, and rather than just break through obviously thin, slightly rotten wood that wouldn't even be difficult to kick open, he instead goes through this long, elaborate rope thing that just makes no sense. There's quite a bit of that, and it doesn't help. He's a very bland character, doesn't have much going for him. I will say this, though, he does have some very good scenes with the companion of this, which leads into this. The companion of this next one of this series being Ruby, which I may accidentally call Rose, but that's just because I'm used to the other blonde British chick in Doctor Who. But overall, Ruby is a decent companion. Nothing I would terribly write home about, but to be fair, most of the companions aren't the type you really write home about much. They're supposed to be the everyman to the eccentric Doctor, and Ruby does a pretty good job of that. You get the sense that she's a pretty somewhat fun-loving individual, but is capable of taking things seriously when they're necessary, and has almost the occasional motherly instinct to little children, which makes a whole lot of sense because she was raised in her adopted mother raises a lot of babies. So I figured that she's adopted. They're trying to play into that as this big plot point, but all I can see is the scene from the Tomorrow World movie. I think I get the name wrong, but and I just don't care for this plot point they're trying to do. It's not set up interestingly. It only makes the Doctor look more pathetic somehow. But overall, though, Ruby is an okay character. I think she'll be fine, especially as she gets more time in the role. What I do actually really love is how the Doctor and Ruby work off of each other. It's in those moments when the two's personalities actually become interesting. Especially by the second episode, they have this fun-loving dynamic where they like to do tricks with each other a little bit. They like to mess with each other. It's overall just actually enjoyable to watch, which is really sad. I wish both of these characters could be more like that when they aren't directly interacting with the other one. But overall, they're kind of bland characters, but not like offensive or bad anyway. I've certainly seen worse characters in stories, and I think especially given time, both of these characters could be fleshed out to be quite interesting. However, that's only one half of the Doctor Who equation. The other one is the sci-fi plots. So how is that in this show? The actual 2 episodes plots, which I won't go into super great details, I'm not going to give you a play-by-play, I'm just going to talk about the highlights or downlights in a lot of cases. So just watch it if you want to get the actual full play-by-play plot, but the actual stories themselves are kind of bad. Like, they're riddled with weird inconsistencies that don't make sense, especially from a world-building perspective, and actively make characters, especially the Doctor, look kind of stupid. Like, in the first episode, the one that deals with time-traveling goblins, which it's actually somehow more underwhelming than it sounds. And it's just stupid. Like, the Doctor, like, somehow both the Doctor and Ruby get beaten up by, like, a small goblins when nothing we see of them should convince us that they would be any amount of threat, even in dozens of numbers. Like, the fact they had to hard cut away the actual fight between them probably shows that even they couldn't fake these goblins being impressive in a straight-on fight. And yes, the Doctor isn't always super violent, but, like, these goblins are going around time eating babies. I think we can get the murder gun out now. And even with that, it's like one of the most bizarre things of how, like, the new Doctor just doesn't seem to want to kill creatures even when they most definitely need it. The goblins are not sympathetic creatures. They eat babies and kill people for fun. Blowing up their ship is a good idea. However, I will give this episode one big piece of credit, is that when the goblins go back in time and try to destroy, like, basically try to eat Ruby when she was a baby, when the timeline gets altered by that, I actually have to be clever that they actually remember the fact that people who are outside the time stream don't always remember when the timeline gets altered. I do, however, wish this was actually said in the show. I don't recall it in this episode, I mean, specifically because a lot of people should be or would be, like, jumping onto Doctor Who at this point, and I only know this because I remember episodes with the Weeping Angels where this is a heavy plot point. And so, unless you know about that, like you've seen Weeping Angels episodes, then you don't know this, so it just feels like the Doctor just randomly doesn't get altered by timelines. Also, another thing that kind of bothers me is that the Doctor is very much offended by the idea that there's the idea of evil time travelers, when, like, dude, you've been dealing with the Master for hundreds of years. This is not, like, you should not be getting offended by that. That's like stating clouds can rain to you. But the second one, and I think the far more interesting one to talk about, is the second episode with the whole baby colony in space. Mostly because that episode actually had me crying, almost crying a tiny bit. Because I had this big emotional moment where the idea of these poor little babies being stuck all in space without their parents actually, because I cry easily when it comes to these kind of things. And then they immediately undercut it with bad comedy, because, did I forget to mention, this show just cannot hold tension for 5 seconds? It's not that they can't build tension. It's not that they can't have a serious, interesting moment. It's that they have to undercut it with bad musicals or a bad joke, or just otherwise not be ignore the obvious stuff in the room that just actually hurts the plot. And this is the one moment where the show actually got kind of political that pissed me off, purely because it was then like, okay, so, like, the setup for this is that on this future planet humanity is colonized. It's Doctor Who. Exactly when in the future is not a relevant question. Is that they have this baby-making factory up on, like, a space station above their planet. I don't know why you wouldn't keep that on the planet, but whatever. And either due to some kind of recession on the planet below, or because they just don't care, it's hard to tell. They're kind of inconsistent with it. They just left the babies there, but didn't bother to turn the machine off, even though they had space shuttles they took down to get most of the personnel off, presuming there would be room to then put babies if you wanted to. And if you didn't have the money to keep the thing running, why wouldn't you just turn the machine off? But the actual political part, the trying to be political part that pissed me off, is that there's a planet in the same solar system that is perfectly willing to take in the baby refugees, but the planet themselves won't come over there to rescue them, and then they have this moment like, oh, that's the thing about refugees, you gotta go get yourself there yourselves, and it's like, dude, if nations went around beating each other up to try to do over humanitarian things, that you could that would be very close to potentially some kind of imperial or colonialist kind of thing. That you could totally make the argument that if you have a very bad nation or a place, that going in there and fixing is a good thing. We can have that discussion. That can be an actual discussion, but you can't just act like it's like, but then it's just like there are so many reasons that even in the story why that planet may have not rescued these babies, because that space station is presumably still property of that planet, which taking a massive station like that could potentially start a war, killing tons of people. There's so many other complexities going on in this situation that just do not get explored, and for a sci-fi plot that's kind of a big deal. But regardless of that, and then blah blah. Oh, in the space, there's also this boogeyman monster kind of thing, which is literally made of boogers, which is just. It wasn't very interesting when Shorts did it, and it's even worse here. But what's even worse is that because of, it's the last of its kind, although it's the only of its kind, the Doctor saves the creature's life, even though the creature is a completely insane monster who just seeks to destroy and kill. It's not like a sympathetic, sentient creature. It's a monster. If there was ever a time to just blow it up and call it over with, this would be the time. So the Doctor going all sympathetic on it, and why would even the babies, which the babies can kind of talk, it's a long story, why would the babies want to save it? This thing's been terrorizing them for 6 years. Why on earth would they have any kind of sympathy for it? Like, literally, he wants to kill them, and nearly got one of them. So, and like, literally, one of them went off to kill it just a second before this. I don't know, like, it's just the most bizarre thing. It just bothers me. Like, they could have, like, the least they could have done is, like, say that the creature was under some kind of mind control. But, like, it's just, it infuriated me. But, and then you have, of course, the running plot line of, who was the person who left Ruby behind, all that jazz, and why can't the Doctor properly remember it? And I'm just not interested. Also, they apparently are still keeping the Timeless Child canon, which, I hate that. I hate that like everyone else. Burn the Timeless Child idea in a fiery pit. The only way I'd even humor its acceptance, and I don't even like it in conception, but I'd only humor it if it was actually the backstory of the Master or another Time Lord. I refuse to accept that's the Doctor. It was a dumb plot line. They should be abandoning it, throwing it out the airlock, and then racing it from the timeline. Sorry. But overall, what's my feelings on the new Doctor Who show? It's meh. It's just kind of bland. Like, sure, there are parts to get worked up about a little bit. There are parts that are actually kind of enjoyable. But overall, it's just a bland sandwich. There's nothing much to write home about. It's not terribly interesting. If this wasn't connected to the Doctor Who brand somehow, no one would care. Because it's just not much worth to care about. Maybe episode 3 and onward get interesting or bad. Although I know one episode after that's terrible. But overall, I just don't care. It's not very good, but it's not really offensively bad for the most part either. It's just bland. That's the only thing I can write home about it. But hey, at least now you have someone who actually told you what kind of happened in this show with some actual, like, thoughts or opinions anyway. But overall, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do you like what I said here? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think the Doctor Who show was great or terrible? Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments, like, dislike, all that jazz, and I will see you all next time. Yeah? Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.